We are live. Go ahead and start.
Hi, Jayne.
Hi, Karen.
For our listening audience, this is Jayne. Is it Cowie? Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yep, that's right.
Good. I think that's important. And you have written this terrific book, Curfew.
Shall I show mine? Because I've got one as well.
Oh, look at yours. Oh,
Yeah. Look at mine. Shiny.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And this is coming out. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the US edition, but there is a UK edition.
There is a UK edition. I actually have. Well, I have a proof of the UK edition, so you can see.
And it's
different
got a
book, different title, and this is coming out in the UK in May. But obviously, this is the American. This is the US that's come out today. So we've got two very different. Yeah.
How exciting!
Really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just for the listeners, could you just give an overview of the story?
So Curfew is set in a near future Britain in which all men are electronically tagged and not allowed out after 7 o'clock. So they have a legally imposed and very strict curfew, which leaves women free to go out and about at night and in the evenings and do what they will. Curfew follows the story of 3 women, a woman called Sarah, who is a mother in her early 40s, newly divorced, seeing her life really open up in Curfew, post-husband, really loving her freedom. A younger woman called Helen, who is a teacher. Helen is desperate for a baby, and she's trying to navigate this world of curfew and restricted men as she tries to sort of build a romantic relationship and look for a father to have, a baby with. And then we have a teenage girl called Cass, who has grown up with curfew, who is about to sort of launch into adulthood in the world of curfew and has a very different view of it to the other two. So Cass is very against the curfew. The 2 older women are very for the curfew.
Yeah.
And it sort of follows these 3. One of the book starts with the discovery of a dead woman in a park, and then we wind back a few weeks and we follow these 3 women as they lead their lives in the time of curfew until you find out, sadly, that one of them is the dead woman in the park.
Where did this idea come from? Where did you develop the story?
Well, I wrote the book originally back in 2019.
Oh.
And this was when Me Too was really everywhere, and we were seeing Harvey Weinstein and various other very famous, successful, wealthy men really being brought down, really by their own behavior, but obviously, but there was a lot of talk about this, and there were lots of conversations about women in public spaces and women's safety in public spaces, and this suggestion of a curfew for men is not new. It's not certainly something I personally invented. It's come up occasionally, but I kind of thought, what would it be like if we actually took this a bit more seriously, if women wanted a bit more than just Harvey Weinstein, if we actually said, hang on a minute, this problem is not just a few rich, famous men. Mm-hmm. This is lots of men in all walks of lives doing terrible things to women. What would we do actually if we decided we'd had enough and we were going to do something about it? What would that look like? And to make women safe in public spaces, we all hear the stories of didn't want to catch the last train, afraid to cross the car park at night, didn't stay for one last drink even though we wanted to because we didn't want to be that bit too drunk when we went home. We're worried to get in a taxi on our own, we're worried to get on a train. If you take men out of that situation, then primarily the biggest threat to women in that situation has gone. So if you want to make women in public spaces at night safe, take away the men. And what would that actually look like if we really did that for real? How would we make it work? And what would the knock-on effects of that sort of social shift be? Because I think it would have a bigger impact and a bigger change than just being able to go out drinking at night and to walk home safely. It would affect women economically. It would start to affect women in the workplace because you get more women in the workplace who then bring more women in, and then they want things like better childcare. They want schools arranged around their working lives rather than having to arrange themselves around how schools work. You know, these things start to shift. So it became this much more complicated, sophisticated world, but it starts with a curfew for men.
Right. What's the time span of the curfew? At what age or time of life do the guys have to start wearing these, and at what point does it end?
So they are tagged from the age of 10. So we catch the boys just pre-adolescence, so before they go into puberty. So the boys get birth to age 10. They get the same freedom as the girls from the age 10 onwards. That's when we start tagging the boys. And in curfew, there's a whole system for tagging men. There are special centres that men go to. You have to go, you know, every couple of months, have your tag checked to make sure it's still working. Little boys go for their first tag on their 10th birthday, and it becomes kind of a rite of passage really for little boys. And it ends when you're dead, when the men die. That's when the tag comes off. So yeah, it's the whole lifespan. Because
there's no good behavior break.
No, because every man is a good man until he does something bad. Because the whole point of the curfew is that it was supposed to be prevention rather than cure. So we don't wait for men to have done something. We just say, maybe not individual men, but men as a group, you are the risk group. Therefore, this is how we are going to collectively manage you, because we can't pick out actually which men it's going to be. We only know it's most likely to be men. So you just a whole lot.
Okay, you know, I really sense, I'm going to say, a depth of passion, both in the book, and you had some author notes at the end.
Yeah.
And to me, it showed a lot of passion you have for this. Is that right? Or
yeah, I mean, it's a really important topic to me personally, as I'm sure you read in my author notes. You know, I grew up with a father who was not a nice man. You know, he was frequently violent, really a bit of a monster. And so by the time I entered early adulthood, I was acutely aware of how unsafe women can be, how unsafe men make women, and really how little care we as a society have for those women. My experience really as a child and then as a teenage girl really was that actually nobody really cared enough to do anything about it. You know, I remember telling teachers at school who kind of didn't want to hear it, would turn away from me. It wasn't a conversation I could have at school. You know, there was just nowhere to turn. And I really had this very strong feeling that we know this stuff goes on, but we don't really care enough to want to do something about it. And actually, we would really like it, most of all, if women didn't talk about it, so we could pretend it was happening somewhere else, over there with other men, not the men we know, not the men we work with, you know, the man that serves us in the shop, the plumber that came to fix the toilet, not our doctor, not our dentist, not our son's teacher, not our brother, not our uncle, but actually it is those men, because it's normal, everyday, ordinary men. It's not scary men hiding in the bushes in the park. It's men you meet every day.
And then doesn't that put you in a very lonely position if no one's listening to you?
Oh, it was dreadful. It was a very difficult, very difficult time. It's a very isolating, difficult, unpleasant experience. And I know absolutely I'm not alone in that experience. There are many, many women and their children have that experience.
I don't mean to minimize it, but a couple of other authors I've talked to, there is the loneliness of being a writer. You're isolating yourself. And there was one gentleman who had been working for a newspaper, and, you know, in the newspaper, it's all noise and all that. And I said, so how did you go from that to sitting in your home office? And his favorite spot was Whataburger, and he used to pace the parking lot. That was his coping skill. So I guess it worked. He has some early.
Yeah.
So how do you cope with that? Or do you feel comfortable with that?
I am actually really happy in my own company. That's my preferred state of being, is when it's just me and the house is quiet and I'm free to, think my own thoughts. I have, as a lot of writers do, I think, a very rich inner life. So most of my life is actually lived in my head and in my imagination, and not so much out in the real world. I have to say, because of COVID, my husband has been in the house for the past 2 years, and that has been quite a lot of time with other people.
Yeah, well, maybe we shouldn't expand on that.
No, it's fine. He's very nice, but I'd like to go back to work now.
Okay, very good. Can you talk a little bit about the mother house, which is where the women who had been abused could go to live with other women in a safe environment?
Yeah, so one of the women, Sarah, the woman in her 40s who is divorced, who's had to sell her house to sort herself out financially, has moved into this place called the Mother House, which is effectively a very, very large, multi-bedroomed, multi-bathroomed house, far too large for kind of a modern family, I suppose a Victorian type building, but it's women only, and men do not come past the front gate. It has very strict rules. So I suppose very similar to a modern domestic violence refuge, where, they keep these spaces often very strictly female only, because women coming out of those situations often have a terrible, terrible, terrible fear of men and need female only space just to kind of recover and get their breath back and get that fear under control. But Sarah makes an active choice to go live there because she wants that all female environment. It's where she feels comfortable, it's where she feels relaxed. And the women in Curfew are allowed to just have that big house and to put these rules in place and just to live collectively as a group of women of all different ages, sharing experiences together. And they have a communal dining room and they eat together, and it becomes like a big family, a really tight-knit, important group.
But her daughter Cass isn't too thrilled with it, because she's first of all, she's very defensive of her father, and she has a boyfriend. That may be,
use the term loosely,
but but she is not totally against men, which causes a lot of conflict with her mother.
It really does. It causes a lot of friction between the two of them, and I think what you need to understand about Cass as a character is this is a young woman, a girl in her late teens, who has grown up with Curfew. It came in when she was 2. So she's never known anything different. And I think, as you find with a lot of these sort of situations or protections or legal rights, when they are in place and they are working, they become invisible. And you take them for granted, because when they work, the problem that they were brought in to solve pretty much disappears. And once it disappears, it can become hard to believe that that was ever actually really a problem at all. So Cass just can't believe what she hasn't seen. And she can't accept that the curfew was ever really necessary. She sees it as totally unjust, totally unfair, very cruel and oppressive for men. It's destroying men's lives. They're held back economically, they're held back in how they go out and live their lives. She has a boy, a 17-year-old boy, who is her best friend / boyfriend, who is facing this really restricted future. And Cass is looking at this thinking, well, that's not fair. Why does he have to have this restricted future? The thing being, of course, for anybody reading this who knows a bit about women's history will know that for a very long time, for young women, it was actually young women at that age who would face a very restricted future, who would know, for example, that the expectation was they probably wouldn't go into further education. If they did, it was probably a bit of a waste of time, because they were going to get married. And as soon as they did, they would be producing babies and out of their job and just in the home doing childcare and mothering and home stuff. And that was going to be their life anyway. And, you know, these opportunities weren't available for women. But in this book, obviously, it's men that have their lives squashed at late teens, and not girls.
And then the mother, Sarah, works at a tagging center.
Yeah, having a great time.
Yeah, because describe her work for a little bit for folks.
So the idea is with the curfew, when the curfew was first brought in, it was literally just imposed as, right, we've got this new law, all men have got to stay in after 7. And of course, plenty of men just said, I'm not doing that. And off they went. So something had to be brought in to actually keep them indoors. We already have these kind of electronic tags. This technology already exists. It's just in the novel, it's rolled out nationally. It becomes a big project, and kind of, instead of the odd man, they're all tagged. And so tagging centres are set up where men go to have a tag checked, to have one fitted to make sure they can't get it off, have it checked to make sure it's working. And they have to go periodically and have their tag checked. So Sarah's job is replacing men's tags and checking their ID and checking they haven't fiddled with it or tried to take it off. And that's what she does for a living. She drives to work, she goes in, and it's kind of like going for a doctor's appointment or a dentist's appointment. You know, the men, they sit in the waiting room, they get called in, they sit in the chair with one leg up because it's on the ankle.
Yeah.
And she pokes at the tag and she taps on the computer, and then she says, you know, next. That's what she does.
I was interested in the relationship that Helen had. First of all, she and Tom, I believe his name was.
Yeah.
Helen and Tom had to go through cohabit counseling.
That's right.
I wasn't clear. Was this a requirement for all couples?
So this was a requirement for any couples who wished to cohabit after curfew had been brought in. So the cohab certificates come in after curfew has been around for a while, because what is well understood and is known obviously in the world of curfew is that although attacks and things which happen in public places get huge amounts of press, actually the biggest danger is inside your own front door. That's where women are most in danger. So once we've sorted public spaces, we then have to look at, well, how do we sort private spaces? So one thing that comes in is that before a man and a woman can live together, they have to undergo counselling so that they can question their relationship properly, and the woman can look at the relationship properly and say, actually, is this really a man that I want in my intimate private space with me all the time? Is this actually a man who is safe for me to live with? Do I really want to take this relationship to that next level? So they have a third party, a counsellor, to talk through all different scenarios and things with them, and to force them to talk about things that they may well have otherwise avoided, like how are we going to manage the money? How are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to work? Who's going to do the domestic chores? How are we going to do, you know, the cooking and the cleaning, and who does what? What are our feelings about children? When do we want them? How many do we want? What are we going to do if we can't have children? So that those big issues have been tackled and dealt with before they start living together. And so that the woman is given multiple opportunities to acknowledge if she has doubts and walk away before she gets herself stuck in a situation that is dangerous, that she can't get out of.
And yet my sense was that Helen and to some degree Tom weren't really working toward that goal. They had their own agenda. And somehow thought they could get the other one to bend toward that, or, you know, or how am I going to do this when I know he or she doesn't like it? So, yeah.
I think the point is it's not trying to suggest that these things are perfect. I think the point of the novel is saying, you know, these things are flawed because we're dealing with people, and people are flawed, and they have their own agendas, and they lie, and they can be manipulative, and they don't always do things in their own or other people's best interests, and they misunderstand situations and each other's, and they make poor choices, even when we enable people, you know, to try and do the best they absolutely can. As you see with all the women in the book, they all make poor choices, even with curfew and all the other things there to support them.
I don't want, I'm afraid I'm going to give away a little too much here, but
Spoilers.
one of the things that Helen is just determined, or it appears to me, she's determined that she wants a child and she's willing to be deceitful to get there.
Yeah.
And when she finally does get pregnant, she's totally disappointed because guess what? She's going to have a boy.
Yeah. And actually the realization that she's going to have a boy and what having a son means in the world of curfew really makes Helen take a step back and think about the things that actually she's refused to think about, because she's kind of been blinded by baby fever.
Yeah.
And it's just been that I know not all women experience this, some women do, but just this utter burning, consuming desperation for a baby, and every other sensible thought having completely gone out of the window, until of course she finds herself in this situation where actually she's forced to face up to a few hard truths about life and motherhood.
It seems that this curfew really mixes up the culture and individual thinking. I mean, I can't imagine anyone like Helen, for instance, being able to anticipate how this is, you know, how great this need for a baby is going to be, and how that's going to complicate her relationship. And I think, and I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but with this curfew 7 to 7, men couldn't, there are some jobs they really couldn't do because they couldn't work overtime or they couldn't work at night. So they were very limited in what they could use. And sometimes the men took over the house cleaning and the getting the kids ready for school. Oh, would you like to explain that?
No, it's fine. But yeah, we do see a bit of a gender swap, don't we, once this comes in, because obviously these out of the house jobs, some of which are traditionally skewed very male, you know, I mean, electricians, plumbers, doctors who work in hospitals still skews quite heavily male, I think, you know, firefighters, the police, all these jobs, suddenly men are actually restricted in terms of their access to these jobs. So we have to bring women in to start doing these jobs, which means also that we have to adjust these jobs to suit women, because one of the things that keeps women out of these jobs, for example, is that if they need specialist equipment, all the equipment is designed for men. So when women actually go into these jobs, they find themselves with body protectors that don't fit, boots that don't fit, uniforms that don't fit, you know, tools that have been designed for the average male hand instead of the average female hand. So they're too big, and everything can be redesigned to fit the female body. It's just there's been no impetus to do it. But in this situation, of course, there is, because we now have an overwhelmingly female workforce in these jobs, and we've got to make it work for them. So we do. And once that shift starts happening, there's an economic shift for women, which starts to address something which, to be honest, we seem to be struggling with majorly, which is the gender pay gap. Because, you know, I'm sure you're aware, you know, although we have equal pay, so men and women get paid the same amount for doing the same job, collectively, men earn and control more of the money than women do, which means that they can borrow more money. So it's easier to get a mortgage, it's easier to get a car loan, it's easier to get funding for a startup. The majority of money for startups goes to men instead of women. And money gives you choices. And once women start being really pushed forward economically and men start being pushed back, women have then got more power and more choices, and the whole of society starts to shift to adapt to actually what women need for their lives. and men just have to sort of fit in with that instead of what we have now, which is really a society that's structured for how men live their lives, and women just kind of have to fit in with that.
No, I believe that the curfew was set up to make women feel safer. Another side effect of that, and as I'm listening to you now, is it a goal to make women even with males, or is it for women to be stronger and higher up the ladder than guys?
It wasn't written in a way of sort of saying, I want women to be better than men. I want women to have more than men. I literally just started with this idea of the curfew and said, if we actually had this curfew, what could the potential knock-on effects of this be? What would society look like? And it would shift women forward economically and put them in a better position than men. So it's not about equality, because we no longer have equality of opportunity. Opportunity actually favors women in this situation, so they will go forward and do better. I'm not sure I'm necessarily unhappy about that. But yes, it isn't a situation that brings equality. It shifts things the other way, because women end up better off than men instead of being on equal footing.
Do you think technology is a friend of women in keeping them safer, helping them to advance, et cetera, et cetera?
I think that technology has been a double-edged sword for women, to be honest. I think that there are obviously things that have made our lives much easier, much better, potentially safer. You know, we wouldn't be without smartphones now. Somebody can track you if you're in the back of a taxi. It's easier to check things online. So I think in those ways things have improved, but I think it has also made life worse for women. If you look at things like the images of women that are now shared online, the images that are sent to women unsolicited, those things, technology has not made women safer.
Yeah.
In that sense, it has actually made it easier to exploit women in that way. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's been a double-edged sword for us, to be honest.
I have seen a couple of places where they've talked about your books, and they have said, think The Handmaid's Tale. How does that flatter you? Do you not care?
Well, it's Margaret Atwood, so it's tremendously flattering, isn't it? I think, you'd be hard pushed to say otherwise. It's a really flattering comparison. I think obviously this is a very, very different book.
Yes.
To The Handmaid's Tale, because The Handmaid's Tale has that real focus on women's reproductive abilities and the abuse of this unique reproductive ability that women have. You know, I mean, only half the world is female, but we all came from a female body. We all grew inside a female body. Every human on the planet right now grew inside a womb. All of us, every single one, male or female. And there's something really astonishing. This ability to basically create a whole entire new human out of effectively nothing. I mean, one day they're not there, and then suddenly they are there. It's magic. But yeah, it's really flattering comparison.
Good.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the cover of the book.
Yeah.
Did you have a choice in the cover or no? You did.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I don't know how much you know about kind of how it works with covers, but generally you get kind of a briefing where I was asked to show my editors some comparative covers that I liked. So covers of books that have come out recently that have really struck me, that I've really liked. They then brief a designer to come up with a design to kind of fit the genre of the book and the feel of the book, to give readers sort of an idea of what sort of book it is. So we had a different one that was more blue, that was kind of a street at night. A street light lit. I'm losing my words now. Street late at night, with a lamp post and a pavement. And but we went with this cover because I think it really has this very speculative feel to it that suggests the novel is dystopian and a little bit different, a little bit unusual, and the black and the red is so striking.
Yes.
And that's why we went with that.
The reason I asked you, are you familiar with J.A. Jans? She's an American author.
I don't think so. It doesn't ring a bell.
Well, she had one series, and then she started a second one in Arizona in the desert, and they were trying to decide on a cover, and they sent her this one with a picture of a saguaro cactus with a flower blooming on it. And she said, no, saguaros don't have flowers, and they wouldn't budge. So she said, well, at least make it pink so people know it's not real. So I'm always curious when I see really an unusual cover, how did this come about? And was it okay with you?
Yeah, it really does go to show, doesn't it, how easily you can get something completely wrong on a cover just from literally not knowing, a bit of geography or the area. Or
Well, and I saw the cover on it's After Hours, or is it After Dark? After Dark, which is quite a bit different than this one.
Yeah, so the actual UK cover does have the young woman. It's a rear view shot of a young woman walking through a park.
Yeah.
In the dark late at night. So very different.
Yeah.
To this one. Yeah.
How does, I feel like I'm jumping around here, but
that's okay.
How does it feel with the parenting roles? How have those changed in that setting?
So as you said already, didn't you? There's a definite sign that in some relationships the men have had to, because they're not at work as much, and they're suddenly not the main earners. They're pushed into domestic roles and child rearing far more. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Because they're earning less, they're working less, they're effectively within the relationship. Theirs is the job that can give a bit when they need to pick an ill child up from school or take them to the dentist, or normally the things that it's normally women that have to flex around the children. Right. But now the women are in the higher paid, more serious jobs. It's the men that are having to flex to do that kind of domestic work. And because it's been pushed on them and it's not optional anymore, they have to step up and do it. But at the same time, I had very much an idea that childcare would also alter to really fit around women's lives as they actually live them, because I know a major problem really we have in society at the moment with women who want to go back to work, who need childcare, is that childcare is very expensive and often very rigid and inflexible. And here in the UK, our schools run at times that don't fit around anybody's job. I don't think anybody's job fits, school times if you have a 5-year-old.
Yep.
School holidays, nobody can fit a job around school holidays. So we would start shifting all these things so that they can work together better to enable women to work and mother more easily, because at the moment women are often expected.
Pardon me, that's my phone.
That's all right.
I thought I had turned it off.
It's still going.
Sorry, Patrick.
No problem.
That was funny.
I'm usually very conscientious about
I was being
sorry.
Really profound. I was going to say at the moment, very much for women are often expected to work like they haven't got children and mother like they don't have to work, when actually we're trying to do, both. So we would have creches in workplaces that would be funded by workplaces so they're cheaper. Schools where the secondary school and the primary school, so the children of all different ages, are all on the same site. So you can get all your children in one go, or your older children can take your younger children home because they're next door to each other and there's a bus. that we would really, we would build society around parenting more in that way, rather than building society around work and then trying to fit parenting to it.
Yeah. Well, what's down the road for you now?
So at the moment, I'm working on the follow-up book to Curfew.
Do you know, that's what I was wondering about, because I thought, I wonder if there's a sequel to this or a series here, because I didn't feel that there was a closure that couldn't be reached.
Yeah, at the moment, no, this is a standalone, and there isn't a sequel sort of planned to go with it at the moment. So the book I'm actually working on, it's another speculative thriller with a sort of female-focused feminist twist to it. So it's based around this idea of what would we do if we could genetically test men for a predisposition to aggression and violence. In other words, if we had a violence gene, and we developed a test for it, and we then started testing newborn baby boys. If you could have your son tested when he's a baby to tell you if he's going to turn out to be a violent man, would you have your son tested at 3 weeks old? What would you do with that information?
Out he was going to be violent. Do you have choices?
Well, this is what the book explores. So it looks into a world where this test has been developed. It's been rolled out. It's in maternity hospitals. We've been testing newborn baby boys. We've now got effectively 2 groups of young men. One group who have passed the test, who've shown, right, we don't have a predisposition for violence, and a group of young men who obviously have failed it and do have a predisposition for violence. And it brings in issues like, well, we would have special parenting. Would we have medical care for these boys? Would we, would we use medication to help them control their behavior? Would we have special schools for them? How would we deal with them? And how would society deal with this whole issue of actually we can now pinpoint the dangerous men very easily?
Would there be any comparable testing to see if females were going to be violent?
In the book as it's written, they aren't testing girls, because if you actually look at statistics for violent crime and you look at prison statistics, the overwhelming majority of people who commit violent crime are men, overwhelmingly. So it's, it doesn't even come close for women. I think the prison population in the UK at the moment, we have something like 4,500 women in prison and close to 90,000 men. We're looking at those sorts of numbers. So again, because it's a feminist speculative novel, it does very much focus on the behavior of men again. Sorry. So it tests boys.
So who do you read? Who are your authors?
I read as much as possible and as widely as possible. So I read all sorts of different things. I read everything from sort of Nora Roberts when I want something, when you're having a bad day and you want a book where, you want to know exactly what you're going to get and it's going to be great. Then I read Nora Roberts. I read speculative fiction, speculative thrillers. I read psychological thrillers, detective novels, old classics, Agatha Christie and the sort of older. I've been reading a lot of Patricia Highsmith recently.
Wow.
Been on a bit of a Tom Ripley stint for a while. At the moment, I'm reading Rachel's Holiday, Marion Keyes, because she's just had a new book out. She's an Irish author. I don't know if you have her.
I don't know.
America. She's a really big selling Irish author. She writes sort of women's fiction. So I'm reading one of her book. All sorts of things. Anne Tyler, I really like. I think she writes about women just so fantastically and so well, and she writes domestic situations just so brilliantly. Read nonfiction. So anything that's not nailed down.
Read a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I was going to ask Patrick, have we had any questions from our listeners?
There was one good question, which was what range of responses has she had from male readers?
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is not the first time I've been asked this question. I should say, when I was initially writing the book and people were saying to me, what are you working on? When I would say to women, it's this book where all the men are electronically tagged, all the women would laugh. But when I would say to men, this is what I'm writing, they would all go a bit pale and sort of give me a second glance and say, excuse me. Responses from men have been quite mixed. I've had some really fantastic responses from men who have said really thought-provoking, really interesting, lots of things in it that they hadn't thought about. And I've also had responses from men who've said, I don't know really how to comment on this without coming across as being misogynistic. And I don't think I am misogynistic, so I don't want to comment on it. So yeah, a bit of a mixed bag, really. I hope some men will read it, and I hope they will get some insight from it, maybe into some of the things that women worry about, some of the things that frighten women, and some of the ways society doesn't work for women, and how it could work if things were done slightly differently. Okay. I don't know.
Any other questions, Patrick?
Just a question about, did you do any research into, kind of communes or, secret society, not secret societies, but I don't really have a question, but one of the viewers is making the comment that just about the restricted life that you were referring to. And she says that it's still a thing for some cultures, including evangelicals and people like that.
That to have these sort of restricted places for women?
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't do massive amounts of sort of really in-depth research into it. There are a couple of places in London close to where I live, which are these kind of female-only communes, primarily for older women. So I did some reading on those places, really learned about the history of them a bit more. But I mean, I was aware that in other cultures, obviously, this sort of sex segregation is quite normal. And historically, it's not a new thing. It's a thing that's been going on for a long time, that some women have chosen to live their lives that way, and some women have been made to live their lives that way.
Okay. One question I had is in the design to develop the society, how did you come up with the idea of tagging? I mean, what were the other choices?
Do you know, it was really a straightforward thought of, we're going to put this law in place and there are going to be men that do not follow it. That was, the two thoughts came, immediately, one after the other. How do we make them follow it? And we already have here in the UK, and I assume you do over there as well, systems in place where some people, for example, people on day release from prison, are tagged so that they can be tracked, and they often will have a curfew where they have to stay within a certain geographical area, or they have to be at home at certain times, and that's what those tags are used for. So my immediate thought was just, we have this technology already available, and we'll just use that. We'll use what we've got. We've got that. And although we do have other technologies which do track people, we know we can track people with smartphones now. As soon as somebody twigs that that's what's being done, you can leave your phone at home. So it had to be something that the men had to take with them, that they couldn't forget or remove or break without somebody knowing what they've done.
And these bracelets or tags, they had no way of removing them. There's a key, and only the key can undo that, and that belongs to the tagging.
Yeah, so the keys, you need a key to undo the tag. The keys are all kept at the tagging center, very tightly controlled, counted in, counted out. And one of the reasons Sarah's job as a tagger is so well paid is because of the level of responsibility
Well,
attached to it.
I think maybe if you want to elaborate a little in that story, one of the keys is lost.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
that kind of strings throughout it comes up throughout the book, throughout the story, because it plays havoc with a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, it does. So it was really about having the understanding that these technologies are not infallible. You know, we've become hugely reliant on all sorts of technologies recently. We very much take them for granted, and we're in a position now where if they all go wrong, we're really, you know, we're quite stuck. But we assume that they are uncrackable, unbreakable, that they are perfect, that they don't go wrong. But what that doesn't take into account is human nature.
Yeah.
And it's so there's a lot in the book about how you can put all these things in place, but really what is your undoing at the end of the day is human nature, and that's men and women, that people make mistakes and do silly things.
Yeah.
And that's really where the problems come from.
Okay, so what is your message to your readers, to your audience, about what you've written, what you plan to write, and anything else you want to say?
I think the message I really wanted to get across when I wrote Curfew was that when we talk about issues like domestic violence, we very often talk about these issues with no mention of men at all. We say that she was a victim of domestic violence, she was assaulted, she was raped, she got herself pregnant, and there's no inclusion of men in that anywhere at all. We focus very much on women and things that are done to women. And what I really wanted to do, and what I feel we as a society really need to do, is to shift that viewpoint and to stop talking about things that are done to women and to start talking about things that men do. So we have huge amounts of data, huge amounts of statistics that can tell you how many women have been a victim of sexual assault. That information is really easy to find. If you go and you look for the opposite and you ask, okay, how many men are carrying out sexual assaults? That data does not exist. We don't know. So we know what percentage of women are assaulted. We do not know what percentage of men carry out assaults. And that's completely the wrong way to look at it. If we're going to solve this problem, we need to look at the people doing it, not the people it's being done to. So how many men is it actually? How common is it? What are their thought processes? How do they get themselves in that situation? Why do they make that choice to behave that way? So it was really about shifting that focus and to ask some questions, which are going to be uncomfortable questions of men. And that's what I would like young women to be doing, is to stop focusing on themselves as victims and to start asking some really difficult questions.
Okay, I think you just answered my question, which was, okay, what's the responsibility of women in equalizing this or getting these other statistics available?
How do we do it? We need to start insisting that this data is collected. We need to stop accepting that information is only collected about women, and we need to start getting the police, the universities, the researchers, the government departments to start asking these questions of men and recording data about what men are doing much better.
Good. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, I don't think so, other than just thank you very much for having me, and it's been really lovely to chat to you this evening.
Thank you. What time is it there?
It is here. Where are we at now? Almost 9 o'clock in the evening.
Oh, okay. Then we didn't keep you up too late.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Not too late. Not bedtime quite yet.
Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to your next book.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
Too much.
I'll try not to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jayne.